Everybody ready?
Ready.
Job's in the bathroom.
Thank you. We're going to start in just a minute when Councilmember Bertrand comes back. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Capitola City Council meeting. May we have the roll call, please?
Councilmember Peterson?
Here.
Councilmember Termini?
Here.
Councilmember Bertrand?
Here.
Councilmember Bottorff?
Here.
Mayor Harlan?
Here. Will everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Tonight's meeting is cablecast live on Charter Communications Cable Television, Channel 8, and AT&T UVerse Channel 99, and is being recorded to be rebroadcast on the following Wednesday at 8 a.m. and on Saturday following the first rebroadcast at 1 p.m. on Charter Channel 71 and Comcast Channel 25. Meetings can also be viewed from the city's website, www.cityofcapitola.org. Our technician tonight is Lynn Dunton. Thank you very much, Lynn. As a reminder, please turn off your cell phones during the meeting. And if you'd like your name spelled correctly in the minutes, then please sign up at the sheet when you come up to speak. So, the first item of business is presentations. Would the presenters like to come up, please?
Good evening, Mayor Harlan,
Good evening.
Council, and guests. I'd like to introduce for everybody Officer Leo Marino, representing the Capitola Police Officers Association and the Capitola Police Department, to make this presentation. Leo.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. Capitola Police Officers Association is honored to have participated in the 2017 Pink Patch Project. This project is part of a public awareness campaign designed to bring attention to the fight against breast cancer. Our association has partnered with Women Care, which is a local organization out of Soquel, which provides emotional and financial support to individuals fighting cancer in Capitola and all of Santa Cruz County. On behalf of the Capitola Police Officers Association, we're pleased to announce that we'll be presenting Women Care with a check for $13,000 from proceeds of the Capitola Police Pink Patch sales, as well as generous donations from local businesses, the Capitola Public Safety and Community Service Foundation, City of Capitola employees, and from numerous community members during the month of October. On behalf of the POA, I want to thank Women Care for partnering with us. They're sitting in the front row here. Chief McManus, members of the City Council, members of City Administration, our community, volunteers, and local businesses for their support, which made this project possible and successful. And
Thank you.
thank you again. We'd like to present them with a check. If you guys can stand, please.
Why don't we have the uniformed officers come up and we'll make the presentation and then take a photo. May we?
All the way up, all the way up.
Come on. Do you need the microphone?
No.
Okay. We're on television, so we want the audience to see you and appreciate all of your wonderful work, and both the fundraisers and the caregivers and providers. It's absolutely wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. Thank you.
Again, on behalf of the Police Officers Association, we're honored that you partnered with us. We'd like to present you with a check for $13,000, and we promise we have a real check for you too. So.
It's our total honor to have been chosen. I mean, Women Care is possible because of the generosity with time, talent, and money of our community. And when an organization like the Capitola Police choose to, where you're on the front lines of service every day, 24/7, 365 days a year, and when you choose to partner with us, it's really an honor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, all the officers, for being here tonight. We really appreciate your support and your help with this, and all the officers and other police department employees. We really appreciate all of you being here. Now we have a new employee to introduce.
Yes, the city clerk's office is delighted to introduce our new records coordinator. Chloe, you can come on up. This is Chloe Woodmansey. She has just joined us this week, as I said, as our new records coordinator. She comes to us having worked within our local public library system and more recently commuting over the hill at a research in human resources at a research recruitment firm. So now she is learning all the intricacies of record keeping and how to let the public know what the public's business is here in Capitola. Welcome, Chloe.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Welcome. We're very we're very happy to have you.
So I just have a question. So you worked in the library here in Santa Cruz?
I worked in the Scotts Valley and Boulder Creek branch primarily, but visited multiple branches just as an aide.
Okay,
But-
so we're not going to have to worry. Because I've said, kids go to the library and they see you, and then they see you on TV here, or they see you
Oh,
here.
and they might get confused.
Yeah.
Yes. No.
Yeah.
I don't think so. It's been a few years.
Okay.
I did see someone at CVS once
Okay.
that I usually gave books to, and they were very confused. But it worked out okay.
It's it.
Yeah.
Well, I'm so happy you're here.
Thank you so much. I'm very pleased.
Okay.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you and welcome.
Good work, Jock, because children believe truly that librarians sleep at the library. They really do.
Really?
Yes.
Could we have a report on closed session, please, from City Attorney Kandati?
Yes. Thank you, Mayor Harlan, members of the City Council. There are two pending litigation items on this evening's closed session agenda. Lawsuits entitled Friends of Monterey Park versus the City of Capitola and the City of Capitola versus D'Angelo. The council received a report from and gave direction to the city attorney on those items. There was no reportable action. I should note for the record that Mayor Harlan and council members Botorff and Peterson were the only members present for the Friends of Monterey Park portion of the discussion. There was also a conference with labor negotiators, the city's negotiator being the city manager, and that involved all bargaining groups, and there was no reportable action.
Thank you very much. Additional materials from City Clerk?
Yes, we received 3 items, all related to item 9A. One was received late this morning, and so there's a copy of that for all of you at the front desk, and of course there are copies available for the public as well. But there were a total of 3 for that item.
Oh, good. Thank you very much. Are there any additional additions or deletions to the agenda?
Staff has no changes this evening.
Thank you. This is the time for public comment. If you'd like to comment on any topic not on the agenda, this is the time you can come up and have 3 minutes to tell us whatever you like. Otherwise, if you're here for an item, please wait till we get to it, and then you're welcome to speak at that time. Otherwise, please come up and address us on any topic. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and council people. This is Bob Edgren. I'm a longtime Capitola person. Anyway, you've been getting my emails. I'm tired of asking, so I'm going to plead. We are very short in our signage department. Every day I go down to the Esplanade twice a day, walk around. Sometimes I confront people who walk their dogs or are skateboarding, and I'm beginning to believe them. They don't see the signs. And they don't. I've talked to enough people. We need somebody to grab the horns here of this little bull and say, let's get a couple consultants in here and go over all our signage. And that's all.
Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to speak? Thank you. Next item is the consent calendar, and I'm sorry, city comments. City council comments. Ed, do you have
I have none.
Jack, do you have anything?
Yeah, I went to the State of the Region Summit yesterday, and it was very encouraging. In terms of how to envision, the expansion of various commercial areas in the city, and it was very appropriate because we're considering now to change the CR designation along Capitola Road to CC. And so I found some of the comments from that presentation, that was the highlight presentation, very useful. And the main focus here is having a people-centric area as opposed to something driven by building large buildings. And the message of the individual who's pretty preeminent in this field is that incremental change is what drives something that has, let's say, the look and feel of something like down at Pleasure Point, where a lot of people now are attracted to it. You just cannot get something put in place and expect everything to turn out right. So a lot to think about.
Thank you. Thank you. Mike, do you have anything?
Yes, this last weekend we had our third annual plein air event, headed by our coordinator, Jenny Shelton, formerly of the Art and Cultural Commission. All the Art and Cultural Commissioners were there. Hundreds of people showed up at New Brighton. We had 40 artists painting in town over the weekend, and we'll have some new art to put up on the wall, the winners of this year's plein air event. So thank you, Art and Cultural Commission. Thank you, Jenny Shelton. Thank you, Capitola.
It was fabulous, and if you haven't gone, you all have to go next year. It's an amazing group of painters that for 2 or 3 or 4 days come down here and paint these scenes that you would not think that a painter would find interesting. And they created the most amazing pictures. And it was just an amazing event. So please go next year. I mean, the creativity and the energy, music, food, it was just a great Capitola Day, just a wonderful Capitola Day. Do you have anything else, Mike?
Nope, that's
Can
it.
I make another comment? I almost hesitate to say this, but a lot of the pictures at, in the New Brighton Gymnasium, or it's not a gymnasium, it's a multi-purpose.
Multi-Purpose Performing Arts Center.
Yeah, Performing Arts Center. Some of them are really beautiful, but there's one picture that kept coming up over and over again, and that's of the wharf. And, many different angles, many different scenes, things like that. And it's an iconic thing in Capitola. Well, we just passed Measure F, right? That means we're going to be redoing the wharf. So think about it.
I just wanted to thank Ted Burke, the owner of the Shadowbrook, for hosting a fundraiser on Tuesday nights for the community groups, and last Tuesday night it was for the Capitola Museum. So I wanted to thank the Shadowbrook and Ted Burke and also everybody that came out to support the museum. Kristen and I were there to greet them, and we had a great time. Everybody had a wonderful time, and it was a lot of fun. Okay. Now we're going to go on to the consent calendar. These are minor items that are in we'll take in one motion unless a member of the public would like to discuss something separately or a member of the council would like to discuss something. So would any council member like to pull anything?
No, I'd like to move consent, but I'd like to make a statement on item D and let the Commission on the Environment know that several years ago, the Art and Cultural Commission had an app produced for the iOS platform, and it is a walking tour of Capitola. It was done in conjunction with the History Museum we have here. So there's a lot of the framework that's in place already. If you could tag onto that, it might make your grant money go further. So, thank you.
Would anyone from the public like to pull any item for separate discussion?
I still need a second also.
Second.
I have a question about G, the animal control ordinance, maybe for Jamie. My question is, if the owner dies and they give the animal to someone else, how do they change that chip information inside? They have to take that chip out and put a new one in, or can they reprogram it? I was just curious.
My recollection, I think that question may have been posed to Melanie, I think at the meeting, and my recollection was that there's a registry, and so you'd come in and basically have the chip just reads out a number, and then you'd go into the database and they change who that chip is associated with. So
The chip stays in.
the chip stays in, and basically the registry, you switch out who the owner is with the registry.
So they would have to contact the owner to
Yeah.
find out if they were deceased and change.
Right. So for example, hypothetical example, but let's just say your next door neighbors had a chipped cat and your next door neighbor's cat decided to move in with you. and you're not allergic to cats, and it's a very nice cat. But in theory, what you need to do is go with the previous owner, or provide some other evidence and go down and say, this is my cat now, and change it out with the registry. So it can be done, but you have to do it. It doesn't happen automatically.
Thank you. Any other questions about anything on the consent calendar? We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next item are our regular items, and so we'll start with A, consider removal of all parking on the south side of Hill Street between Capitola Avenue and Rosedale Avenue for the installation of bike and pedestrian lanes.
Good evening.
Jessberg.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. The item before you is one that you've seen before and we've talked about on several occasions. I'll give you a brief recap of where we've gone and go through the recommendations. So as you're all aware, the Hill Street between Capitola Avenue and Rosedale is a narrow road, 32 feet curb to curb, has parking on both sides and no sidewalks or bike lanes in it. As you can see from these pictures, cars are essentially driving down the middle of the road. Two cars come upon each other. One is required to pull over into a driveway or into a place where there's nowhere to park. Same happens with pedestrians and bicycles that are forced to walk in the middle of the street because there's no other lanes. Graphically, here's how this looks. It's just a very narrow and tight street without sidewalks. On June 8th, this council directed the Public Works to implement a pilot program in which we removed the parking on the south side of the street from July 7th to August 4th. During that time, we monitored 3 aspects of traffic on the street. We measured the traffic and volume before the trial started, during the trial, and after the trial. And we still looked at volume, speed, and parking utilization. And then following that, we conducted another community workshop on August 9th, in which we asked people to give us their opinion. We also mailed a survey out to all the residents that we had notified and asked them to give us their opinion and feedback on the trial program. So here's a look at what the trial program like. You can see we removed the parking on the south side of the street, placed pylons along there, and provided a pedestrian pathway and bike pathway on the south side of the street. Here's pictures of what it looked like. You can see there's no parking on this side of the street, and there's the pylons. Sorry, those aren't the best pictures. So looking at the 3 things that we studied, first we'll look at vehicle speed. So the top row of numbers here is what it was, existing conditions or prior to the pilot program going in. You can see the average speeds and the 85th percentile speeds are 25, 27 miles an hour for the 85th. And the average speeds were 18 or 20 miles an hour, depending on which directions. During the pilot program, they're essentially the same. There wasn't a great increase in speed. I know that's one thing we were worried about, is you make the roads a little wider and speeds pick up, but we didn't find that. At the second workshop, there was a request that we also look at conditions after school is in session. So we did take a snapshot picture on August 30th when school is in session. And again, there's no big significant changes in the speed here. Looking at the volume data, we're going to find the same thing. Again, the top row was before we did the trial, during the trial, and the bottom is the snapshot we did after when school is in session. So the volumes didn't change much during the summer months. You can see quite a bit of jump, almost 200 cars when school is in session, and that was expected. We know that Hill Street is a route from Soquel to New Brighton Middle School. It also has pedestrians and bikes on it at that time. So I would say the program itself didn't have any changes, but we did see a change when school started. This one's a little harder to look at, but I'll try and walk us through it. This is parking utilization on the streets, on Hill Street and the surrounding streets around the area. These were taken during the trial, so when we had removed the 18 parking spaces on the south side, and then we also looked at it right after we did those to get some comparison. So Hill Street, this is the project area right here. During the project, let me back up. All the parking counts were taken between 5 and 5:30 p.m. We tried to do it at a consistent time so that, we realized that 7 o'clock in the evenings may be a little more crowded, but we wanted to be consistent when we took it, so we had comparable data. Excuse me. On Hill Street, we found that the parking was 89% utilized during the project, and 93%. Those are essentially the same as far as this data is concerned. Hill Street west of Capitola Avenue, it went down quite a bit. So this is in the area from going down toward Nob Hill. You can see we had 80% utilization when the trial program was in place, and it went down to 22% once it was. So that's one place where cars were going to find additional parking. East of Rosedale stayed essentially the same. That's a dead-end cul-de-sac portion of Hill Street, and is pretty much always full of cars. Pine Street, which runs parallel to Hill Street between Cap Ave and Rosedale, again, didn't see a big change. We're at 63% utilization during the trial period, and it went down slightly to 59%. Capitola Avenue, there's two sections of Capitola Ave. One is going north toward Highway 1, and this is probably the biggest area we saw a big change in. I think that's to be expected. That's we have the mobile home park and an apartment building in that area. That's the closest parking to them. And then Capitola Ave south of Hill Street, we didn't see a big change. And then Rosedale, again, Rosedale immediately south of Hill Street did see quite an increase, although there seemed to be always parking available there. And as we go another block farther south, it became insignificant changes there. So one thing that they came up at the second workshop was looking at pedestrian and bike traffic, because different people had different stories about the volumes of bikes and peds on there. So we did do a pedestrian bicycle count, and this was a snapshot on August 30th, and you can see we had a total of 96 bikes and peds, more pedestrians than we did bicycles. The people doing the survey were careful not to count people walking to those cars. As far as they could tell, this was people that were transiting down using Rosedale Avenue to walk on or to bike on. So 96 total trips represents about 6% of the vehicle traffic, and that's not an insignificant amount for that type of road. So community feedback, like I said, we sent surveys out to all the residents and property owners in the area. We hosted the second workshop, and I'd say a total, we probably mailed out 100 to 125 surveys. We received feedback on 55 of them. Of those, 65% supported the pilot program and thought it should become permanent. 30% were against it, and 5% were undecided. And we broke it down by what side of the street they were living on, just because obviously I think there's some benefits to one side of the street or the other. So for those supporting it, 4 lived on the north side of Hill Street, 13 lived on the south side, and 9 lived in the mobile home park. In the negative, you can see the numbers here, and the total responses. So we had 10 from the north side, 15 from the south side, and 15 from the mobile home park. So I'd like to just kind of run through some changes that we've made, and it looks like we'll be able to make in the near future to add additional on-street parking in the area. One is when we had the first hearing here in June on this matter, it was brought up that there's an abandoned bus stop on Rosedale right before Hill Street, and that this was a no parking from here to corner sign that prohibited parking in this bus zone area. Right after that meeting, we did contact the Metro, and they told us we could go ahead and allow cars to park in here, so that sign was removed. The bus stop sign remains, so we're now communicating with them about whether we can remove the bus stop signs. And I think they have some issues, but I think we'll be able to work through them. I have a feeling that cars may not be parking right in this immediate area, and so if we can remove the bus stop sign, we'll have parking all the way up into the corner. Another similar one exists that I hadn't really seen, I'll admit, before. This is a no parking here to corner. This is on Hill Street, right before Capitola Avenue. And there's a bus stop here. Like the one on Rosedale, this bus stop is no longer used by Santa Cruz Metro. So we will be removing this no parking from here to corner, and again, trying to figure out what to do with this bus stop sign for a stop that's not there. But just by removing that, I anticipate we'll at least add one more spot in here. Now looking on Capitola Avenue, north of Hill Street, so this is between Hill Street and Highway 1, immediately north of Hill Street, we have this very long red zone here. And what this is a culmination of 15 feet at a fire hydrant, another bus stop. This is an active bus stop for buses that go up Hill Street, and then a view red zone that allows people to get transit in and out see out of this driveway. So total, this is about, I'm estimating 130 feet of red zone. And what we're going to try and do is see if we can work with Metro to move this bus stop down this way a little bit, combine it with the 15 feet of no parking for the parking meter because the buses aren't there for very long. We'll still need some red zone here so people can get in and out of this driveway safely, but it looks like there's a possibility of opening up some spaces in here, one or two. But like I said, we're trying to work with Metro on that. And then farther up Hill Street, there seems to be a double length of red zone for this driveway. We're revisiting that and making sure why that got put in as double length. Typically they're 15 feet, and this one's definitely longer than that. So we're revisiting that, maybe able to add another spot right here. So that concludes my presentation, and the recommendations are for the council to approve the removal of the on-site parking on the south side of Hill Street between Rosedale Avenue and Capitola Avenue to a common installation of a pedestrian bicycle lane. And I'm adding this wasn't in the agenda report, but to direct Public Works to review the existing bus stops and red zones in the area to add on-street parking. Are there any questions?
Are there any questions? Steve, that was excellent, and that was very creative. I love it. I love it. I mean, that's what we need to do every once in a while, is kind of look around town and see what needs to be changed, you know, that's not working and could free up some more spaces like that. That's wonderful. Jacques?
Yeah. So we did get a letter from, I guess, the property managers of the apartment complex, and they stated that they felt the speeds did increase when the project was being evaluated. But because of your data presentation, doesn't seem that's the case. So
that's what our data shows, that the speed did not increase when we took the parking off.
Okay. And thank you very much for being proactive to try to come up with extra parking spaces. I appreciate that.
Other questions? Would anyone from the public like to speak? I'll open it up to the public if you have comments on this. If you like it or don't like it or have other ideas. Good evening. Thanks for coming down tonight.
Thank you. My name is Bill Waldron, and I live at 505 Hill Street. It's affected by this whole situation. And first of all, I wish those people had ticket books with them when they did all these, because you could get stored vehicles on the street. It's a real issue. I call, you know, way too many times to say, can we get something done about this with the police department? They come up and ticket them, but so that is an issue that if we can have a semi, you're gonna have to patrol that area if you do this bike lane. People are going to take advantage of it if you don't go up there and patrol it. That's going to be the problem. I've lived there since 1984. I've seen a lot of stuff, and I really feel that it is an issue because if you have two cars parked, you can't walk down the street safely, period. And it's really been a problem, and I'm really thankful that something's being done. And I hope you all vote in favor of this, because it's really important to the safety of the kids. It's not about the parking for the apartment place. They can find it. As you see in the pictures, there was parking everywhere. So all you have to do is go up there anytime. When I left today to come down here, there's plenty of parking on the north side of the street. So parking's not an issue. It is the stored cars. It's got to be patrolled. And if you can have somebody just come up there once in a while, that'd be great. But there's a car right now that's got a March 2017 registration. That's
What kind of
parked
car,
on
what
it.
kind of car is it?
It's a black old truck.
Okay, so noted.
Yeah.
We got it. Thank you.
So anyhow, just to let you know, it'd be great to have a presence. If you're going to do this, you're going to have a presence. And because people are going to take, if you don't have, when you have the little thing sticking up, they can't park there. But if you don't have that, you just have the stripes and the red and whatever, people are going to take advantage of that. So I don't want to be like a little cop on the street, but that's what I've been because nobody else does anything. So it's my street, and I plan on being there for a long time. So I'm really thankful. I hope you all back this measure. Okay? Thanks.
Thank you very much for coming down, and we hear you. We'll try to do a better job in that area.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to speak? Good evening.
Hi, I'm Teresa Green. I also live on Hill Street, and I just want to say, yes, I would like you to approve this as well. As the other gentleman said, it's not about the parking, it's about safety. And I get to watch the kids go by there, on their bikes and walking and this, that, and the other, and this will make it safer.
Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to speak? Then I'll close it and bring it back to the council. Would anyone like to start?
I'll move the staff recommendation. I don't think there's much more to say about it. I've received several phone calls, not letters, of people that said that was the best thing you've ever done. So I will move the staff recommendation.
I'll second it.
Any other discussion?
I just have a couple. I have a couple comments. I did spend a day walking the entire street, talking to most of the neighbors there, and it seems like the statistics that I got back confirm what Steve had gathered. That I only found 2 residents that wanted to maintain the parking, and they had their reasons for it, which I could understand. But most of the neighbors were in favor of it, and I was surprised that even when talking to some of the people that lived in the apartment building, which only provides 1 parking for most of the people which have 2 cars, that even the people believe that even though it would cause them an inconvenience to move their cars, they were in favor of having the bike lane put in and 1 lane of parking. I do think that one thing that needs to be stressed here is, this is a project that's easy for us to do, to go in there and take away your parking and put in the bike lane and allow for the bikes. But I think it involves a commitment from this city council next year, I hope, and I'm going to be lobbying for that, is for the sidewalks to be placed on that side of the street, because there's still not a place for the pedestrians to walk. So I'm going to be lobbying very heavy with some Measure D money next year for sidewalks on the side of the street where we're taking away the cars. But other than that, I think it's a pretty obvious thing that the neighborhoods all support and will benefit that neighborhood greatly.
Jack?
Yeah, I walk the street many times, also at night too, because my wife and I go that way on our run up to Blue Bar Park. But one thing I'd like to take particularly note of, being Capitola, we have a lot of community meetings, and that's something that I'm fully in support of. I think most of us up here also are in support of that too. So the first meeting I went to that Steve organized, people had conflicting views about, north side, south side, who's going to benefit and everything like that. And so there was a lot of public discussion about that. And then there were some charrettes put up there that people could go to and see how things would look one way or the other. And the 2 people that came here today, I'm sorry, I can't remember your names right now, that's what the general consensus got to. People are concerned about the kids that go to school, and they take that route. So some people say, I'm losing parking, but when it comes to the fact that kids are going to be safer and they use that for their bikes and stuff like that, that's what I like to see in Capitola. I really do. Thank you.
Any other comments? We have a motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very
Thank you,
much. Thank you, everybody, for coming. This is step one. Step one. We got some other steps to work on. Yeah. Okay, item B, receiver report on special event highlights and issues for 2017.
I just want to go on the record as saying the Easter egg hunt is not a minor event. It's very important in this town, so I'll let you know that right now.
Thank you. I agree.
Okay.
Good evening, Chief McManus.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. With all due respect, Councilmember Termini, you need to bump it above 200 attendees to...
Oh. We're going to work on it. I think there might
The second item before you this evening is the annual recap of our special events for 2017. With staff seeking council direction regarding changes to specific recurring special event permit conditions, and to determine if any additional review is required for the upcoming 2018 special event permits, to include general permits and potentially the minor permits. As mentioned, the special event permits are divided into two categories. General permits, of which we had 11 and 2 remaining for 2017, are those special event permits that had 200 or more attendees and predicted impacts or known impacts based upon the previous year's event, the police department's assessment of the event, including after-action reports. And then the minor special event permits are those that have 200 or fewer attendees and limited impact or no known impact from the police department perspective. For 2017, we had a total of 14 minor special event permits. Those, as you are aware, based upon council decisions several years ago, are approved by the city manager after staff review. And then we had 11 recurring general special event permits, and as I mentioned, 2 of those are remaining. On the 25th, we have Surfing Santa, and on the 15th of December, we have the first ice skate event that's going to occur beginning on the 15th through the 7th of January. Now, worth noting on that ice skate event, this is the first year of the event. We would assume that if it's successful, and it likely will be, that it will come forward for the second event next year in 2018. And so that's not a recurring event for 2017. And in fact, if there's a request for it to continue for a second year, it would probably be wise for the police department and staff to review the 2017 event into the 7th of January to make an assessment if in fact that will be likely or prudent to go forward as a recurrent event, and potentially, or in the event that there are concerns from council, certainly discussion potentially at this level in council with that event. So that's included in 2017, but as a reminder, it's the first year for that event this year. Other general special event permits with no major problems noted by the police department or staff, other city staff, or events such as the Mermaid Triathlon that was brought forward this past year at the request of council, are reviewed at the police department and then again approved by the city manager for those recurrent events moving into 2018. And so as mentioned, for 2017, we had 11 general and 14 minor special event permits. With those events, there were a total of 223 police department personnel hours billed and 100 public works personnel hours that were billed and recouped or reimbursed at the cost of $23,285. Before I get into some specifics about 6 of the general events, and they're the 6 business events that we're all familiar with, I did want to mention a couple of operational changes that we made at the police department and this year leading into the peak special event season for us, which we all know is from May through the month of October. Some of the things that we adjusted and actually changed with full support from staff there in the police department. I thought it was necessary to identify the sergeant who is going to be responsible with writing that contingency plan or that operational order earlier maybe than we had been. That sergeant who is identified in quotes as the incident commander, by identifying that person early on, it gives them the chance to do a couple of real important things in my opinion. Look at last year's after action report, see what type of adjustments we might need to consider or actually make leading into the planning of the current year's contingency, and reach out to the promoter or the coordinators to get them on board early on. Often for the large events, such as Art and Wine, Begonia, Wharf to Wharf, and the majority of the 6 I'm going to talk about, that early contact with the promoter is absolutely necessary. And so we made some adjustments and took care of that this year, and I think that it produced positive results. The other thing that we did was conduct formal lineup briefings for each of the major 6 events. And that was important for a couple of reasons for me. Selfishly, this being my first year, I wanted to see what our plan looked like, and I wanted to see the performance of my staff, of the sergeants. The other thing, and probably most importantly, we learned that although we didn't have a large number of calls for service at any of the events, and I'll talk about that in a minute, we did have post-event emails that were not so supportive of the event. Many of them came to you. Some of them came to my attention, and we follow up on each one of them. The majority of those, I believe, were driven by a level of frustration from the person complaining, typically or more often related to the conversation that they had with our traffic control personnel at different intersections. And the way that we handled that in these formal briefings, the sergeant presented the plan. We did a roll call. We identify each of the personnel working the contingency. We identify their assignments. And then that sergeant is tasked with communicating the police posture for all of the personnel working that event. When you understand, especially with younger officers, especially with VIPs and explorers, when you understand the posture of the police department, you understand how to communicate and answer questions more appropriately of the people who are impacted by the traffic closures. And so I think that worked very well in conducting these formal lineups, and I was very happy with how those went throughout the entire year. Now, I'm going to talk about 6 of the events. They're all general special event permits. And these are the 6 largest special events, all of them with road closures that are 2 things. That's the most difficult piece of managing the event, the number of personnel needed for the road closure. And that is, as we all know, often the largest impact on those community members and citizens that don't always participate in the event. And so I'm going to go in chronological order, starting with the car show, which was June 10th and 11th. It was the 12th annual car show. It was sold out ahead of time, as it always is, with about 300 total cars. I was the chairperson with the foundation of this car show. I'm very happy with the outcome. I thought it was a very successful event. I thought it was enjoyed by all of the attendees. We had no major concerns with regard to the crowd. The one negative that was revealed in the after-action report was a break, and I took responsibility for this as a chairperson, was a little bit of a breakdown in communications with regard, on the planning side, with regard to the posting of the no parking zones and the communication of the impacted area because of the closure in the village. Because there was a breakdown, there was 13 cars that needed to be towed the morning of the event, and that's way too high. We'd like to keep that less than 5. That's not unusual over the past many years here with Capitola, but certainly 13 is too many. So that's one thing we learned with the car show event. The next event, chronologically, is the Wharf to Wharf. That occurred on July 23rd, 45th annual race. Road closures from 6:30 in the morning until 12:30 on race day. That's a short period of time. There's 15,000 runners and participants for that event. And so large-scale impact in the village for a short period of time. We had no calls for service on the day of the event or complaints directed to the police department with regard to that special event permit. A little bit of less than productive conversations between ourselves on the planning side and the Wharf to Wharf committee that led in that event to a larger number of tows as well. I think we had 10 for that event. August, as you know, is it's not slow, but it's slow because it's absent a special event or general special event for the month of August. September is the busiest month. We all know that, beginning with the Begonia Festival on September 1st through the 4th. The 65th and final, my first Begonia Festival. It was a wonderful event. I think that we all enjoyed it. The festival itself attracts a large number of people, this one especially being the last one, and honestly, an increase from an average for the last several years of about 3 to 5, I think, floats in the Nautical Parade to Mayor Harlan, what were there, 12 or 13? There were a good number of floats. Yeah. That attracted maybe more people, that in addition to this being the final event. And I want to make sure that I reiterate this. It's Labor Day weekend. That attracts a large number of people to the beach. It always will. And the high heat brought many people over the hill who were able to escape the higher heat in Santa Clara County and enjoy the begonia at the same time. A combination of all of those, you probably saw some of the pictures. It was a wonderful event. It was a very difficult event to manage. I think we were very effective with a limited number of personnel for a wonderful event. That Begonia Festival, one of the unique pieces this time, as you're aware, we closed the trestle at 7 in the morning. That presented a little bit of challenges with the deployment of personnel, but we provided clear direction to the uniformed officers. We weren't going to rely on volunteers to post themselves at the trestle, this being the first year to close it down. We had no issues at all. I want to credit the community and the citizens. They were very cooperative and very compliant. They wondered why we were closing it for the first time, but they had no problem. And thank you to Public Works, Steve is behind me, or whomever did all the tree trimming along Wharf Road. That made it much nicer for the people who would have liked to stay up on the trestle. They found good spots on Wharf Road, and so it didn't impact anybody's, I believe, ability to watch the nautical parade. It did, as I mentioned at the time, generate some media interest, of course. Their story being is there are some terrorist-type threats that we were exposed to that are causing us to close the trestle for this year. And being proactive with the media on the front side, I think, managed that. I know that it managed it fairly well. No calls for service at that event during the Begonia Festival, during the event. Now, that doesn't mean that the officers weren't proactive and the officers weren't talking to people who needed to be talked to. There are a minimal number of arrests throughout the entire special event season, but we had no recorded calls for service related to the Begonia Festival, which is a little bit surprising given the number of people attending that Sunday event during the nautical parade. The Art and Wine was the next weekend on the 9th and 10th. Estimated 40,000 people for the two-day event. Road closures at 6 in the morning until on Saturday until 8 p.m. on Sunday. That was an extended closure on Sunday due to a clear delay in the new vendor understanding how systematically to pick up the tents and get them to their vehicles and out of the area. And so that was quite a challenge for both the promoters and that staff with Art and Wine, as well as the PD staff. Typically, it's cleared by about 5 o'clock. This was 8 p.m. It was 8 p.m. When we were able to finally open up the streets and break down the closures. We had fewer calls for service in this year compared to 2016. 6 total calls for service. Aside from the Monty firework show, which had 11 calls for service on the event day. This was the second largest number of calls for service. No surprise, the majority of those are related to alcohol type behavior and problems associated. This was the first year that they used first alarm security on foot to do some patrols in the evening hours, and we thought that worked out very well. And so we would recommend to the coordinator that they do that same thing next year. October 7th was a mermaid triathlon. Now, this is the event that we brought back to council in 2017 due to concerns, repeated concerns, to be honest, from some of the community, specifically related to the amplified sound system, as well as some of the traffic closures. And I want to give Carlo Ficino, I hope I said that right, a lot of credit. He was very easy to work with. He made some adjustments in the planning side that we think provided the results that you were looking for on behalf of the constituents to make this event, the 2017 event, a better event than it was in 2016 with fewer problems. No calls for service on that event day. Tremendous impact, we know that, with regard to the closures and the traffic control points related to the event, and especially the closures and the impact up here in the parking lots. And then finally, the Monty fireworks show was on October 8th, the day after the Mermaid Triathlon. The unique challenge from the police perspective with this event is it's an evening event. And so, of course, there's a lot of congestion, as there is with other events. This one's well attended. Everybody loved the fireworks show. But in the evening, the visibility is poor. The lighting is decent. And there are many people on foot and in vehicles that introduce a little bit different level of safety in travel for people who are attending or trying to get to the event. Sergeant Marquise Booth was the incident commander for that event, did a wonderful job. From an elevated position, we were able to make a determination when we needed to both lock down the streets and prevent vehicles from traveling through anymore because there were too many people, and then strategically open areas incrementally, allow for vehicles to travel through to get people as efficiently as we could out of the affected area and back to their homes. I'm happy to say that we had very few complaints from the neighboring residential communities from those who weren't attending with regard to the traffic closures. I think the communication from the fixed traffic control points with our personnel was effective. We understood what the plan was. We understood and predicted the questions that were going to be presented. And we allowed people to pass through to get home after determining that there were residents there and not simply trying to get through a traffic closure, a traffic control point as a spectator. And I think that it worked out really well. I know that it did. We did have 11 calls for service, as I mentioned, with regard to the noise into the police department on the day of the event. The most significant vehicle congestion for the Monty fireworks show was up in the Jewel Box area. It took quite a lot of time for the pedestrians and the vehicles to move through that area, but it did not require additional or extended personnel hours to pull that off. And they were very patient in their driving to safely and slowly get out of the Jewel Box area back to their homes. I want to finish by saying and making public my praise and my sincere appreciation to the police department. Again, this being my first year, for honestly being able to pull this off. There's tremendous impact for us, as you well know. There's tremendous impact to the city, but it's good impact because these events are wonderful. And because we were methodical and very precise in our planning, I think that it worked out, in my opinion, as a police chief, as good as I could have expected it to. And I do look forward to the 2018 special events. And I think that the officers and the supervisors, on behalf of the city and the community, take the right approach in properly managing the safety as it relates to these very dynamic events. That ends my presentation. I'm more than willing to answer any questions you might have.
Kristen.
You mentioned that there was 11 calls during the day of the fireworks show.
Yeah.
Was there any distinction of how many of those calls came in during the show itself and how many were in regard to concerns for firework activity in the surrounding neighborhoods?
Yes. The several calls came in at the conclusion. The show started about 8:20, I believe. It was the longest fireworks show I've ever seen. And the finale was something else. And so there were a number, I think 3 or so specific noise complaints that came in with regard to the end of the fireworks show. The remaining calls for service were in fact related to other non-event related illegal fireworks. And that's not unusual, as we all know, in this area.
Thank you.
Any questions or comments?
Are you going to have a sergeant on duty that's going to stay the same, or are you going to rotate that? I mean,
Well, all the sergeants are
brought
on.
someone with you, so I'm wondering.
Yeah, Andy was my backup.
He was your backup. Okay, gotcha. I was wondering why it was in there.
It's a rotational based upon
It will be
that
rotated.
sergeant's schedule at the time.
Okay, got it. Okay, thanks.
Well, my comment to the council members is I'm always concerned about the number of events that we have in town and the impact on our police department and public works department. And it kind of freaked me out when the Begonia Festival this year to see that many people down on the beach, on the streets, in the sidewalks, everywhere, knowing how many police officers we have, how many volunteers we have, how many public works officers we have, and so forth. And knowing that we're a small city and a small staff and so forth, I thought that was way too many people. I know we couldn't control it, we couldn't do anything, but it made me really nervous to have that many people. So, but we can't control that. But I'm just concerned about the number of events, whether we're handling them comfortably and people are still getting their time off during the summer because mandatory overtime and stuff doesn't feel real good to me. And I mean, sometimes we have to if we're down officers. But to do it for events, I don't want to do it for events. I want them to have a life, have their days off, not have, mandatory overtime things. And so I just want to be real careful about this, and same thing with Public Works.
I think we're all very sensitive to that, evidenced by the last public event request that we've had, that we pretty much put the message out that it's good, don't bring us any more. And I had significantly fewer complaints this year, both in the fireworks and in the street closures for the Mermaid Marathon. So last year it was a firestorm, literally. And this year you've done something right. It really worked out. Thank you.
But I'd like the staff to take a real close look at it. And if they feel that it's getting to be too much, that people aren't getting their days off, that we don't have to have so many events the following year. Let's evaluate it real carefully and closely this year. And if I hear next summer that people aren't getting days off, and it's not because of personnel, but it's because of events or something, that's not where the direction I want to go in. Yes.
Well, I'll go ahead and ask the chief. Chief, do you think that the number of events that we have this year are overtaxing our police department?
Well, I think that they're difficult to manage. We have the right number of personnel and a specific deployment plan that puts those personnel in the right positions to manage them properly. I think that we all understand and appreciate that the summer months or the peak season from May through October places substantial demands on all personnel in the police department. And in fact, it's all hands on deck for each of these 6 events throughout the year, right. With the exception of those officers who we need to hold back to work the evening hours at the close of the event. So, you know, it's difficult for me because I'm very happy with our results. And thank you, Councilmember Termini, for your favorable comment with regard to some of the adjustments that I think that we made. But there's significant impact for the police department, city staff, and others because of the volume of people who attend these wonderful events. And I don't want to miss the opportunity, and I'm repeating myself, to recognize that a summer holiday such as Labor Day is a special event in itself. It just does not require a general special event permit. And so regardless of Begonia or other events, if it's a holiday weekend especially, or as the weather isn't here in Capitola, much better than over the hill, it requires significant staffing just to manage the number of people, where often the daytime population is doubling because of the understandable decision people are making and families are making to come visit Capitola.
But I would say if you guys need some breathing rooms, a little wiggle room, you know, because you're having to have, I don't want all hands on deck for 5 months, you know. I want people to have their vacations and their time off and stuff like that.
Thank you.
So I would say, you know, if we're getting really squeezed, we don't have to have all these runs. The runs are not for the locals. They're, you know, people come into town and they do these runs, and they don't impact us that much because they're only, you know, for a few hours in the morning. But they do take time. They, you know, it all takes time. So if we're squeezed for stuff, we could eliminate a couple of these runs, and I don't think people would mind. They'll go somewhere else and do it. They're very popular, and, you know, they just do it somewhere else. But if it's impacting our staff to a, you know, a big extent, I really want to look at that because we're small staff, and we have a lot of events. It's a lot of work. So,
and I appreciate that, and it's worth me mentioning that, you know, as the chief and on behalf of everyone in the police department, it is our function. You know, we're a public safety department, and it is our responsibility to properly manage and provide for a safe venue or a safe city for the people who enjoy Capitola. And so, you know, I appreciate and respect that that's an important and a priority function for all police departments, and I will never put myself in a position to make comment or make presentation to suggest that I'm trying to escape that function, because it's often the most enjoyable, and protecting the citizenry and making for a great event for them is very important.
But we've had this, my point is, I guess we've had the same staff for 20 years. This list has increased, hasn't it? This list has increased. We get new things all the time. I mean, we haven't had so many the last couple of years. It's been more stable. But we didn't used to have all those things, and we have the same staff. So I just want us to be really, really careful of our staff, that we're not burning them out.
Appreciate that.
You know? Any other comments?
Yeah, I'll make a comment. With Stephanie's comments in mind, what you do also helps the flavor of Capitola, the spirit of Capitola. It makes it a wonderful place. And people know they could come here and feel safe and enjoy themselves. We're a family city. Look at the beach. You know, it's kids, mothers, dads, you know, just enjoying themselves. So thank you for helping that happen.
It's our pleasure. Thank you.
Anyone want to make a motion?
Move to receive the report.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you for everybody for all your wonderful work in the police department.
Thanks for your comments, Andy.
Item C, subdivision ordinance cleanup.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, council members.
I was hoping we'd get a new binder.
I know, I was short
I
of
just
binder.
don't have enough.
No. Before we do kick that off, I did have a staff comment that I missed at the beginning. I did want to point out that you do have version 10.0 of our zoning code on your desks, and that is in fact the 10th draft of the code.
This is 10.0.
This is version 10.0.
This will work with my new iPhone 8?
No, it's not compatible with that. That's going to be version 11.0.
Okay.
Sorry.
Well,
But
you
this
know,
is the 10th draft.
I was going to suggest that to get this, and to go through it very thoroughly and completely, and just in a couple of weeks, we may need another meeting to finish it up.
Yeah,
That's a lot for the public and for us to read in a couple of weeks.
Well, yeah, we will be meeting for the first time to talk about it. We're going to get some time on the agenda next meeting, and then we have a meeting after that, and then we can look into scheduling meetings into 2019 if we'd like. I mean, 18.
Thanks.
Or 19. That was a slip.
That was a good one.
I hope that's not broadcasting your opinion on this process.
Oh, no.
Good evening.
Thanks again, Madam Mayor. On to other ordinance amendments. I'm back before you this evening with the subdivision ordinance amendment. You'll recall that we presented this to you last month, subsequent to the council voting to introduce the ordinance. We did receive some public comments and some comments from Coastal Commission staff that we needed to incorporate to ensure their certification. So we've made those revisions. We consider them minor, and we've incorporated into the draft that's before you this evening. Because we did have these revisions, we are required to reintroduce the ordinance, and that's why we're before you again this evening. How a lot of these issues came to play was we had a number of subdivision applications over the last several months which exposed some pretty significant flaws in the ordinance that we felt needed to be fixed. So we worked with the city attorney's office to define some of those. Just in a nutshell, we had several inconsistent definitions across our municipal code that were embedded in the subdivision ordinance. There were some inconsistencies with the current requirements of the State Map Act. There was no design exception process for lot design in the ordinance. There was unclear and inconsistent references to decision-making authorities and appeal processes, and there was no standards at all for lot line adjustments. So we felt that these specific areas needed to be addressed. And just a reminder, this is not a comprehensive update. We really went out and tried to surgically choose those areas that needed fixing now to make our ordinance legally adequate. The Coastal Commission revisions that I mentioned, we consider them pretty minor. They added a section to note that subdivisions in the coastal zone require coastal development permits. Also added provisions to clarify the lot line adjustments require coastal development permits and consistency with our certified local coastal program. And they added a finding that lot line adjustments in the coastal zone must provide equivalent or better protection of coastal resources. The other issue that arose we want to talk to you about a little bit tonight is the frontage requirements. In the subdivision ordinance, there's a provision found in 1624 170E, which states in part that lots without frontage on a street of 20 feet or more will not be permitted. It's a little bit unclear if this provision is intended to require 20 feet of street frontage or an unspecified amount of frontage on a minimum 20-foot wide street. So to help kind of determine the original intent of the staff did go back several years and looked at approved subdivision applications. Based on our review of those approvals, it appears that the city has applied the section in the past to require that each lot have a minimum of 20 feet of street frontage. Now, one good example of this was the subdivision of 410 Bay Avenue, where you can see the area that's circled was kind of widened out right at the street to comply with the 20 feet of frontage requirement as staff had interpreted it. However, all of the recently approved subdivisions we reviewed also provided frontage on a minimum 20-foot wide road. In fact, I don't think there are many roads in Capitola that are under 20 feet. We looked around, and the only one we could identify with certainty was El Camino Medio, one-way street. In addition, the zoning code defines a street as having a minimum 20-foot wide access way, which seems to suggest that maybe it was a 20-foot road that was the intention. The subdivision ordinance refers to frontage on a street of 20 feet or more. And these definitions, as I mentioned, kind of suggest that maybe the original intention was to require street width and not the amount of frontage. So we've presented three options to the council tonight on this issue. We'd like to get your direction. If you'd like us to require 20 feet of street frontage, we'll clarify the language to make that abundantly clear. Alternatively, you could direct us to require an unspecified amount of frontage on a minimum 20-foot wide street. Or thirdly, we could require 20 feet of frontage on a minimum 20-foot wide street or road. From staff's perspective, it seems to make the most sense to go with either options 1 or 3. Having 1 foot or 1 inch on a 20-foot road, I'm not sure what that does for the city. Nonetheless, we'll take your direction on that. So staff's recommending the council introduce the proposed ordinance amendment this evening and schedule a second reading for November 21st, 2017. I welcome your questions. Thank you.
Are there any questions? So we're going to take these issues one by one to go through the whole packet?
So,
Should I call on the audience for each particular item, or wait till the end of your presentation?
However, the presentation is concluded. The only issue that I think is of substance that you didn't consider during the October meeting was the frontage question.
Okay. Any questions before I open it up to the public? Would anyone from the public like to speak on this? Then I'll close. Oh, yes.
You're not going to get off that easy.
Good evening.
Good evening. Bob Edgren again. Quick question. Did you open up the public discussion in the last issue of the events? Because I was waiting for that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Maybe I didn't. Do you want to speak about that? Please do now.
Really quick. Thank you for raising some good points, Mayor. Yeah, the events, if you all remember, if you were here, when we had the fireworks for 4th of July, that was ended because we had too many people pouring into the city, and it got real messy. And when this Monty event that happened last time, I saw the same energy happening. A lot of new people, a lot of people, and it's a foggy night, and it was cold. We got stopped at Monterey Avenue there. It wasn't a pleasant show for me, and I really don't care for it. If there was one to scratch off, I would scratch that off. It's just something that doesn't make sense. It looks like it's growing every year, which you alluded to. By the way, maybe an answer to the police situation is what the chief mentioned earlier, and that is the hiring of first alarm guards. Make the event organizers hire their own security. We could still have police presence, but maybe not as much. The Art and Wine, it's a great event. The Mermaid Festival was kind of weird. I went down there early, and there wasn't any spectators. It was just the participants. So I'm wondering, is that really worth it? I don't know. To me, it was kind of strange. I think that's about it. The car show seems to be winding down itself. It used to be on Sunday. It was like a full day with a lot of cars out there, but now on Sunday it just peters down to maybe a couple dozen cars. So that's something you might want to look at, just making it a one-day event. Other than that, that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Would you like to speak on this item?
Yeah, I was curious, how many parcels are you really looking at in Capitola with a 20-foot? Do you have any estimate? It seems like
20 feet wide street or 20-foot wide?
20-foot wide lot. Yeah, that's what you're talking about. Both, either or. Yeah, I'm just how many lots are in Capitola with a 20-foot wide?
Not very many.
Yeah, so that's kind of I don't know. Anyway. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Other question? Anyone else from the public would like to speak on this? Then I'll bring it back to the council. And who would like to start on this?
I'll weigh in. I think that it's looked over the proposal, and I think for the simple application of this, option one to just require 20-foot frontage seems the simplest and the easiest for us to impose.
But we don't always have. Do we always have 20 feet on flag lots?
The ones that we surveyed did. In fact, the one that we have projected up here at 410 Bay Avenue, it looks like they purposely kind of had that frontage flared out to meet the 20 feet.
Yep. I'll second it. Any other comments, questions?
Would you explain a little bit more about the LCP amendment resolution?
So the subdivision ordinance is part of the city's certified local coastal program, so any changes we make here locally must be certified by the Coastal Commission before they go into effect in the coastal zone. So we're going to have to submit a package to them to amend the LCP, and as part of that process they require you to adopt a resolution directing us to do that.
Okay. Any other questions or discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Do we have a first? Do we have a motion?
Mine was motion to adopt
Seconded by the mayor.
the ordinance with the only change that was asked was
The 20.
the 20-foot item 1, which was 20 feet.
So the motion passes unanimously. Great, thank you very much. Okay, item D, consider the meeting schedule for the city council and the successor agency, which is the agency that used to be the redevelopment agency that has a funny name now.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, I'm going to take this evening. Usually this item is on your consent calendar, but I just did want to call your attention to a couple of things about next year's calendar and give the council the opportunity to weigh in. The first is that because it's an election cycle, staff is proposing to flip-flop the August recess to give us an early August meeting. That early August meeting, you may recall, is kind of critical if the city does want to put something on the November ballot, because that's usually right before the deadline to submit for the November ballot. So we're proposing to flip-flop, so we would be dark the first meeting in July, and then the second meeting in August for our summer schedule. So that's one minor tweak we're proposing for next year. The second item is really just to toss an idea out there for council consideration, is to consider moving the council meeting start time. We've started at 7 o'clock for many, many years. I have noticed, though, that over time, we do tend to lose attendance as we get later into the evening, and there are times when there are people who are here for an item on the agenda, and as it draws later into the evening, sometimes they depart. So if we were to move our council meetings earlier in the evening, we would get to our agenda items earlier. That said, I know that the 7 o'clock start time was also done deliberately to give people who are working a normal office schedule the opportunity to go home, eat, and then come. So staff is open to either. We can do either one, but I have noticed that as we get later, it does seem that attendance dwindles, and we haven't had as long closed sessions the last several years that we used to have. And I've thought that the possibility of starting a little bit earlier could mean that we could get to the city's business earlier in the evening. With that, I'm available for questions.
Madam Mayor, two points on that. I like the idea of starting at 6:30 because by the time we go through all of our, bureaucracy, we don't really get down to the meat of the agenda. We don't even get to the consent calendar probably till 7, even if we started at 6:30. I'd be concerned for anyone on the council working a regular job that they would be able to get here for a 5:30 closed session, because an hour is kind of our norm, hour and 15 at the most.
That would be my only concern, with the point you just made. And since I'm in the retired position, I'm not going to weigh in on this, and I'm going to let someone else.
I still work, but not really, so I'll leave it to Kristen.
I don't have a problem with the 6:30 start time. It seems, reasonable, and I hadn't considered the hour prior for the 5:30 closed session. If we agreed to it now, is it set in stone? Is this something that we can't come back to?
Or we can also wait and see what your schedule is going to be like in the next couple of months, and then we can consider changing it then. We don't have to change it.
I would say if you have reservation, I'll say one thing. Look at the time right now. It's 8:15 and we're almost out the door.
Yeah.
I've been noticing that most of our meetings have not gone past 9 o'clock. So it isn't like we're putting people to sleep in the audience. And if you have any reservations about a job, because what this is going to do is this is going to establish the calendar for 2018.
Right.
Okay.
So I say let's punt.
Okay.
Yeah, let's just wait.
That's fine with
Leave it as is, and yeah.
Well, we do want to adopt a meeting calendar. We could wait for one of our upcoming November meetings,
we
but
can
I'm
do it
not.
later.
We can adopt it right now, but just not
Change it.
agree
Not
to the
change the
6:30 at
time.
this
Yeah.
time.
That's fine.
And when we do adopt it, let's also consider staff, because 8:30 is an anomaly. We have to agree. I mean, we've been here even this year till 10.
We've been really good.
We've been good. We haven't been here at 2 a.m.
All those 10 o'clock meetings are in the past.
We were here pretty close to 10.
I appreciate your point. I would be sensitive to staff, but I don't want to put a burden on a council member that has a job.
Right.
So I'm thinking about yourself and Chris.
Right.
I still think you have a job.
Don't talk to any of my employees.
Can we? Is there room to finagle with the actual schedule? Because, why do we have consent in the front? Can we have it in the back? Depending on who's in the audience, maybe we can move some regular items up so that we could vote and deal with that ahead of time, and then
Consent's 45 seconds most of the time.
Yeah,
Well, the purpose of having, if I may answer, the purpose of having consent early is so that if you pull something, you have a place to put it. If you have your hearings ahead of consent, then you're pulling it immediately after. So that's been the practice, and we often tend to put things from consent immediately, but our agenda process is that it goes to the back.
I'll move the calendar, keeping the meetings at 7 o'clock.
Okay.
I'll second.
Any other discussion, comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Good, yeah, we can always change it. We can
Absolutely.
always change it. So that's not a problem at all.
Well, thanks for the extra binder.
So we don't have any other business unless there's any other announcements from anyone or good news?
For those who might still be watching, I would like to remind people that we are doing recruitments right now for several of our advisory boards. We do have openings on the Arts and Cultural Commission, Finance, Traffic and Parking. We've just lost our village, one of our village representatives, and as Councilmember Bertrand has noted a couple times, we still need a bicycle representative for our RTC Advisory Committee. So there are opportunities to get involved. Call City Hall, visit the website. We'd love to have more volunteers.
And I received, Madam Mayor, a note of thanks to the police chief for the radar trailer being put on Capitol Avenue. It has made a change. He asked that perhaps it could get relocated more towards the downhill portion, because that's where the cars really start to pick up some speed, but I'll leave it to the police department. But the resident was very happy to see that radar trailer.
Good job.
We have a question for you, Steve, sorry.
Someone said we were letting you guys off early, so I'm sorry. I have a cold.
See what happens when we don't start at 6:30?
Yeah.
I just want to let you know that.
Steve, there's probably a few people in the public still watching. Would you explain about the survey for Jewel Box that you just released it? And I think this is an important function of our city in this time.
So per the council direction, when we were considering the traffic issues on Topaz Avenue, we had formed a committee of residents from streets in that area and have put together a survey of traffic issues for what we're calling the greater Jewel Box area. It expands out beyond what's formerly known as the Jewel Box. That survey, we've mailed out postcards to over 2,000 residents and property owners in there. On that postcard, there's a link to the survey that they can follow and take the survey, and we're going to keep the survey open until December 8th, and we're hoping to get lots of feedback from that.
Okay. I noticed you guys were working a long time on that, working with a committee of people in the area to come up with questions. So thanks for that work.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it.
Great. Any other questions or announcements? Then we are adjourned. Thank you all very much.